This time on KEI Fabrication.
The last day that you see it. Got the trans temperature sensor installed. Hide all the women and children. Hide all the women and children. Hide all the women and children. All the grinding's done. Time to clean the garage. Well folks, I just came back from the scrapyard. So I ran up to the scrapyard. Well, we're up here at the junkyard. Well, we're back in the junkyard. Alright, we're back from the parts store. Let's try this again. The question that you're going to be asked when you go to buy a trans filter for your 4L60E from a Silverado, early Silverado, in my case it's a 99. The question is going to be, is it a shallow pan or a deep pan? Now, I measured the pan before I went in and it has a depth of 3 inches. The screen says with 4-inch pickup tube. What that means is that the pickup tube extends an additional inch into the transmission. So if you're going to go get a filter for your 99 Silverado 4L60E, you measure the pan with a tape measure. If it's 3 inches from the flange to the bottom of the pan, you have a deep pan. On an encouraging note, a tiny little bit of powder in the bottom. The magnet obviously caught some of that powder. I have no idea when this was changed. There's 193,000 for all I know of on this transmission. I have no idea when it was serviced last. It is an aftermarket filter. I don't believe that's a GM filter. So it has been done at some point in its life. But from what I see here, there's nothing scary about what's going on. So I'll clean that up perfectly. I'm going to measure where weld a fitting on the pan for the transmission temperature sensor, and that'll be another thing I can cross off the drag week list. I don't know how you guys get these little seals out for these dipstick tubes, but I used a pilot bearing remover and it worked really slick. There's plenty of room in the trans to make it work, so I'm pretty psyched about that. Maybe that'll help you out as well. I don't know what you folks use to install them little seals for the transmission filter, but I used a 3/4 socket and tapped it up in there and it worked just nice. Alright folks, what I'm trying to do here is install a capillary tube type temperature gauge in my transmission pan. The measurements that I took are going to put the sensor right about here. There's a spot without any hardware in the pan. You need to have a special fitting that comes with the gauge. The capillary tube goes in. It has a tapered seat here. This is 1/2 inch NPT threads. what I did was I went to the hardware store and I picked up a 1/2-inch NPT cap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this. You can see that there's threads down, the threads end down to the bottom. So I'm going to cut it after the threads, and that'll open up the back here. I'm going to stick this in the lathe, and I'm going to turn down these little things that are designed for a wrench, pipe wrench, to put these things on. And I'm also going to turn it around in the lathe, and I'm just going to turn this OD down and put a little chamfer on here, so when I weld it, it's a nice clean surface. So let's see how that goes. Alright, I just finished turning this little shoulder on there. I got rid of those little bumps that the wrench used to fit on. I used the countersinking tool to just take the burr off the inside. I put a little chamfer on the outside, and what I'm going to do now is flop this around that I got a nice true surface. I'm going to turn down the OD, put a little chamfer here, and that'll provide a nice area for the weld to go into. Alright, so I had just enough room for the cutter to go in and miss the jaws of the chuck, and I've got a nice chamfer in there, so when I weld it, I'll get some penetration out of the deal. Alright, let's go put a hole in the oil pan. Too late to turn back now. So what I've got here is it's 2 inches from the pan rail to the center line of the hole, and then it's centered between these 2 holes, and that's going to work out really nice for the positioning. It's going to clear the exhaust pipe, the shifter cable, and still get the capillary tube to take the temperature of the oil down in the sump of the pan. So now I got, it's far enough away from the pan rail so I can get my nozzle to my MIG gun around there. Got the chamfer in there. I'm not sure if this pan is galvanized or aluminized or something, so I'm going to hit it with a flapper disc. Definitely going to take the burr off the inside, and then I'm going to put it together and tack it in place, and then I'll do a weld, and I'll probably fill it with water just to see if it has any leaks. Alright, that should get rid of, I think it is galvanized. There's something going on the outside. hopefully by knocking this coating off the inside, it'll stop a nasty bubbling. When you start to boil, that coating takes the shielding gas away and it just makes a mess. And because we're trying to hold back tranny fluid here, we want to make sure that it's a nice watertight seal. So, time to get the welder out. Good job. Trying to overlap the start and stops to minimize the porosity. So we'll see how that goes. One more at the top. Hopefully that doesn't leak. Alright, so I'm going to let that cool down real good. I'll check it for leaks, and then I'm going to get it all cleaned out, so brake clean, and then I'm going to put it on the vehicle. One of the things I did was I picked up a square pipe plug to go in there so I can leak check it if I ever want to eliminate the temperature gauge or any other reason. So I'll throw this in the spare parts box just in case I have some sort of problem with the temperature gauge capillary tube breaking or leaking, or it gets ripped off on a curb or something. So anyway, this was $1.39. That fitting was $1.99. If you're wondering why I didn't buy a different type of fitting, so it didn't need to be machined and all that sort of thing. Well, first of all, I'm cheap. Second of all, it's a real small hardware store in town. This is the only fitting that I found that I could make work. So I spent a half hour modifying it, and I'm into the temperature sensor bung for you know, $5 total, I guess you could say. I've accomplished my goals. So I could have bought a really nice machine steel one, you know, for $10 or $12. I would have had to wait probably 3 or 4 days for it. You know, I bought this at the hardware store this afternoon, and you know, I'll be driving the truck in another hour. Okay folks, I decided to use some fluid from my parts washer. It's kind of a penetrating oil on its own, so I think if it was gonna be, it would be a better leak detector than just water. I've got it tilted up on an angle, and I've got a piece of paper towel here. I'm gonna let it sit for a half hour or so while I go eat supper. And then when I come back, if everything's good, I'm going to install it on the truck. Alright, no leaks. Time to put it back together. Alright folks, got the trans temperature sensor installed. I've got it loomed so it's away from the shifter cable and it's up clear from the exhaust, and we should be good to go. I'm going to lower it down, fill it up with tranny fluid, and then we'll take it for a test drive. The whole reason why I went through the trouble of putting this temperature gauge on the transmission is for drag week I plan on towing a trailer, and depending on how many spares I bring, anticipating problems, whether it's a long block and a transmission in the rear end. I was just concerned and curious more than anything to what the temperature was running at. I could always back off or pull over to the side and rest, give the truck a break based on what this temperature gauge is telling me. So far so good. Okay, we just went out for a test drive and we beat it up a little bit, and I never saw it go over 160, which is good. The coolant temp right now, because it's been idling a few minutes, is heading towards 180, so the trans temperature is probably always going to be around the same temperature as the coolant. Going down the road on the highway or even around town, right now this thing, because the thermostat I think is messed up, runs at 160. And then, so my tranny is too. You can see the temperature is climbing just a tiny bit because it's been sitting here idling for a couple minutes. So I've never had a trans temperature gauge or when they had a warning light or something like that. So this is going to be interesting for me. So anyway, something I wanted to do. I also wanted to do the tranny service on it with the filter and new fluid. That's all done. So another item off the drag week list.
Next time on KEI Fabrication.
Folks, we're just arriving. This is the Patriot football stadium. We're just pulling in. You can see a line of cars all over the place, so this should be pretty exciting for me.